Ateneo opening half, call upon Zosa.
It's quite lovely, Mr. Speaker, that Croke bench kept talking about Iraq in today's debate, because I'm fairly certain that everyone here today will agree that that was the right thing to do. Because we did find weapons of mass destruction, apparently, because Cowell and Cowell apparently did not lie and had complete intelligence, because apparently George Bush Jr. did not have anything against the regime of Saddam Hussein. This kind of validity of reasoning is going to be applied. So what exactly did we stand for in today's debate? What we said, Mr. Speaker, was simple. We are willing to intervene in instances wherein genocide is occurring. That's not something that the other side of the House can reasonably expect or to defend, that we're going to stand by while a massacre of an entire ethnicity occurs. What we're going to stand for is instances wherein you disagree with the manner in which a state runs itself, precisely because of the manner in which this kind of reasoning will be used by particular states. So what am I going to do for you today? No thanks, take a seat. I'm going to talk about the idea of a last resort and precisely how states will not use this in that manner. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how recognizing this idea as a valid reason polarizes the world to the extent that discredits any attempts at the democratization that they want to happen. Rebuttal will be integrated. Let's talk about the first thing. Why won't it be a last resort if you recognize it as a valid reason for an invasion? The recognition of everything as a last resort allows for the prevention of states randomly choosing to invade whenever they see fit. That's why everything or invasions have to be a last resort. Why is this important? Because states, Mr. Speaker, are naturally self-interested. The concept of sovereignty is there to protect states from the encroachment of potentially expansionist neighboring states or perhaps states on the other side of the world, regardless of geographical location. This principle, not just of sovereignty, but the principle of last resort, is supposed to protect those states who are disempowered from being at the mercy and behest of bullies in the international community's playground of giants. This kind of policy, Mr. Speaker, is supposed to protect states, like how, for instance, Russia went into Georgia. A lot of people would say, rashly, in order to be able to protect Abkhazia and South Ossetia. But a lot of people would also contend that the reason that invasion occurred was precisely because Russia wanted to try and create the will in order to be able for it to have satellite states, or in order for it to be able to apply pressure to Georgia, precisely because its rival nation, the United States, was trying to put in a missile defense thingy in that particular area. That was not the motive, Mr. Speaker, was not necessarily, no thanks, take seat. The motive was not in order to be able to protect the citizens of that state. The motive was in order for it to be able to protect its self-interest. This manifests in other areas, like how the United States, for instance, entered Vietnam, according to them, for the protection of democracy. But really what they were doing at the time was trying to put up or trying to fight a proxy war during the Cold War. What do these examples show you? No thanks, take a seat. What these examples show you, Mr. Speaker, is that the lens of self-interest can be rationalized in several ways. They are able to defend these kinds of decisions to invade to their local population, and a lot of the time, war fervor will enter, nationalistic fervor will enter, and these individuals will support that. And states like the United States have clearly shown to you in the past that they don't necessarily care what the rest of the international community thinks, for as long as there is a reason, like they are trying to protect themselves through preemptive action. No thanks, take a seat. The lens is self-interest, Mr. Speaker, and not necessarily what is best for the citizens of that state or what is best for the international community. Therefore, making it a valid reason is precisely what allowed the Bush regime to run amok and wage all these wars that we are currently having trouble winning. Because you cannot, expect to transport democracy or export democracy through the use of force, because that doesn't create a democratic culture that the other side of the House wants to promote in today's debate. Basically, Shiveena said that she wanted people to have the democratic choice to give up their democratic choices. Mr. Speaker, it simply doesn't make sense. Now, anyway.
And in a post-Iraq scenario, when the United States is receiving so much flack for having invaded Iraq, we think countries are going to use this with caution.
Mr. Speaker, if it's a valid reason, and it's going to be reinforced and ratified by all other states, and it's going to be part of a chart of the UN Charter, or a certain legal conceptual framework, etc., they won't get flack anymore because there's no reason to give them flack anymore. Now, second thing, recognizing that this is a valid reason polarizes the world to the extent that discredits any attempt towards democratization. They say things like the juntas aren't for the people. They say things like apparently populist leaders that the United States dislike don't want to provide the welfare services that they are currently providing. What we say from opposition is that these individuals from the other side of the House aren't for those people as well. No thanks, take a seat. Why? Because recognizing this idea of regime change as a valid reason for an invasion leads, Mr. Speaker, to individual states being automatically defensive and having an adversarial relationship, which undercuts diplomatic efforts that could possibly work. Let's take a look at two different approaches. Because if you say that, given that I've argued that it's not going to be a last resort, and will possibly likely be a best or, the first resort, let's take a look at other ways in which you can try to export democracies or try to install regime change. Let's compare the US approach with the entire world versus the European Union's approach with the Eastern Bloc of European nations. What is more effective? Because what the United States has done thus far is to try to eliminate particular regimes that they dislike without, they'll be treated initially as liberators, but for the most part, they'll be seen as people imposing their will on that particular population. That's why rebel militias are a big thing in these states, precisely because that kind of effort did not have internal support necessarily, and that kind of effort, Mr. Speaker, didn't necessarily spring from an organic movement. You compare this with the EU approach of not invading, but trying to provide Eastern Bloc nations with enough of a reason to try and democratize. You try to give them the carrot of membership in the European Union. You try to give them the carrot, Mr. Speaker, of being able to trade and being able to, access a lot of benefits to that membership. And what you have is that states trying to change themselves internally in order to be able to accommodate, the desires of these particular nations so that they are able to access these kinds of benefits. And what this shows you, Mr. Speaker, is that this approach actually works a lot better. Because not only does it influence the mindset of individuals who are currently in power, but it also influences the mindsets of individuals who are trying to subscribe to that kind of power. So what have you heard from first opposition here in today's debate? What you've heard here today, Mr. Speaker, is simple. Iraq was a mistake. Vietnam was a mistake. Invasions, Mr. Speaker, for the most part, are mistakes. In fact, the reason why Afghanistan exists is precisely because you invaded it back in 1979. And for these reasons and more, Mr. Speaker, we say that the motion should fall.